The black void of space rippled unnaturally as a massive ship materialized at the edge of the Sol system. Its silhouette was a blot of darkness against the faint glimmers of distant stars. The Veltra's flagship, Obsidian Vow, radiated menace, its angular hull absorbing the dim light like a predator lying in wait. The surrounding fleet, a swarm of smaller but equally ominous vessels, emerged from hyperspace in synchronized bursts. Their arrival sent gravitational ripples through the asteroid belt, unsettling ancient rocks from their dormant orbits. On the Obsidian Vow's bridge, Supreme Strategist Zalvar stood tall, his elongated figure shrouded in a faint aura of bioluminescent glow. The Veltra's multifaceted eyes shimmered like shattered gemstones as he surveyed the holographic display of the system. He reached out, his translucent fingers ghosting across the controls with the precision of a maestro. The third planet hung in the projection, a blue and white marble seemingly out of place among the cold desolation of the outer planets. "Primitive," Zalvar muttered, his voice like the scrape of stone. "Their technology is rudimentary at best, no defensive capabilities worth mentioning." His adjutant, a smaller, hunched Veltrac named Zephyr, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "They rely on chemical combustion for propulsion," he confirmed. "Fossil fuel technologies. Scans show faint electromagnetic signatures, likely crude satellites." Zalvar's crest of sharp spines quivered, a sign of his disdain. "Then they pose no threat. Begin the fleet's advancement. We shall make Jupiter our base of operations. Let the Velari chase phantoms while we rebuild." The Veltracs had chosen Earth's system not for conquest, but as a temporary haven to regroup after their latest defeat in the Galactic War. Zalvar had calculated that no species as undeveloped as humanity could pose a threat, let alone interfere. Yet as his fleet surged forward, dark shapes gliding silently past the asteroid belt, his calculations were already being tested. On the other side of the belt, Lieutenant Marcus Hale stood inside the Kuiper Belt monitoring station. The station's dim lighting and stale air were a stark contrast to the cold brilliance of the stars outside. Hale's sharp features were etched with concentration as he scrutinized the holographic display in front of him. "Anything yet, Lieutenant?" asked Ava Sharp, his junior officer, her voice tinged with weariness. She leaned against the console, her eyes darting between screens. Hale didn't respond immediately. He was fixated on the irregular gravitational distortions rippling through the belt. The patterns were too synchronized to be natural. His jaw tightened as he adjusted the station's quantum sensor array, bringing a sharper focus to the anomaly. "There," Hale said finally, his voice low but firm. "They've arrived." Ava straightened, her weariness replaced by alarm. "How many?" "Enough to make this a problem." Hale's fingers flew across the interface, recalibrating the visuals. The holographic display lit up with dozens of signals, each one a glowing representation of an alien vessel. The flagship dwarfed the others, a harbinger of destruction surrounded by its lethal entourage. Ava let out a slow breath. "That's a fleet. What do we do?" "We follow protocol," Hale said, his tone calm despite the growing tension. He activated the station's quantum communicator, a technology so advanced it was buried beneath layers of classified files and theoretical papers. "Control, this is Kuiper Station. We have a code black. Repeat, code black. Multiple unidentified vessels have breached the system. Request immediate response." The line hissed with static before a clipped voice responded. "Acknowledged, Kuiper. Hold position. Transmitting data now." Hale leaned back, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. The last code black had been a drill years ago. This was no drill. "Think they're here to conquer us?" Ava asked, her voice hushed. "They're not here for sightseeing," Hale replied. He glanced at the holographic map again, his eyes narrowing. "But they're not moving toward Earth yet. They're scouting." Ava crossed her arms. "And what's stopping them from finding us?" Hale didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the hologram, then drifted to the small viewport. Beyond it, the asteroid belt loomed, silent and indifferent. He felt the fragility of the station, of his own existence against the vastness of space. Yet, a flicker of resolve burned within him. "Let them come," Hale said finally, his voice quiet but firm. They don't know what they're walking into. Far away in Earth's subterranean United Earth Defense Command, General Elias Vance stared at the massive display dominating the war room. The data from Kuiper Station scrolled in real time, red icons marking the alien fleet's every movement. Vance's stoic face betrayed little emotion, but his sharp eyes gleamed with a spark of something deeper. Anticipation. "They're finally here," Vance murmured. To his left, Commander Diana Cross tapped her tablet, her expression grim. Initial assessments align with Kuiper's report. They're heading for Jupiter's orbit, likely establishing a forward base. No indication of aggression toward Earth yet. Vance nodded. "Typical arrogance. They think we're harmless." Diana's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Should we correct that?" "Not yet." Vance turned to the room's assembled officers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we've prepared for. Initiate silent protocols, activate all orbital surveillance networks, and begin passive monitoring. No overt actions. We need them to think we're nothing but shadows." The room buzzed with activity as officers relayed orders. Vance's gaze returned to the display, the red icons now converging on the asteroid belt. "Let's see how far their arrogance takes them," he said quietly. As the Veltra fleet pushed deeper into the system, the subtle hum of their gravitational engines disrupted the fragile equilibrium of the belt. Comets shifted course, spiraling unpredictably. On the flagship, Zalvar watched the chaos with detached satisfaction. "Primitives," he muttered again, a faint trace of amusement in his tone. "Prepare the survey drones. We'll begin mapping the system's resources." Zephyr hesitated. "Exalted strategist, shall we not dispatch a defensive perimeter?" Zalvar's crest flared briefly. "Against what? Do you fear rocks?" The smaller Veltra inclined his head, chastened. "As you command." But as the drones launched, tiny metallic orbs vanishing into the blackness, a ripple passed through the belt. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like another natural disturbance. Yet on Kuiper Station, Hale's sensors picked up the faint pulse of energy. "They're deploying drones," he said, his voice sharp. "What are they looking for?" Ava asked. "Resources, weaknesses, or both?" Hale's fingers hovered over the controls. "But they won't find us yet." As the Velthrak drones moved through the belt, their scans missed the faintest flickers of human activity. Cloaked satellites, long dormant, began to awaken. Their surfaces shimmered as they synchronized with hidden human installations scattered across the solar system. Silent signals pulsed back to Earth, feeding critical data into a growing web of strategy. And aboard the Obsidian Vow, Zalvar remained oblivious to the growing storm. His gaze lingered on Earth's distant blue glow, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the tiny orb. "They will serve," he said, his tone final, "like all the others." If he had looked closer, perhaps he might have seen the faint shimmer of an orbital platform or the subtle distortions in space where Earth's defenses waited. But he didn't. And as the Velthrak fleet pressed forward, the humans of Sol prepared to prove just how far from primitive they truly were. Zalvar stood motionless on the Obsidian Vow's bridge, his sharp gaze fixed on the holographic projection of Earth. The tiny orb seemed vulnerable, its surface marred with swirling clouds that reflected sunlight in a manner almost delicate. It was a world of fragility, unremarkable and small, yet strategically useful. The Velthrax had chosen this system for its obscurity, a haven to rebuild and evade their adversaries. Still, something about this place gnawed at the edges of Zalvar's instincts like the faint whisper of a distant storm. "Survey drones returning," Zephyr reported, his mandibles clicking as he manipulated the control panel. "No advanced defenses detected, minimal energy emissions. Most of the planet's power grid appears inefficient, localized, reliant on fossil combustion." "Good," Zalvar replied, his voice a low rasp. His crest pulsed faintly with satisfaction. "Continue establishing forward bases. Deploy orbital scanners around Jupiter's moons. We'll conceal ourselves beneath their magnetic fields." Zephyr hesitated, the faint twitch of his spines betraying unease. "Exalted strategist, should we increase our scans of the system? There are anomalies. Subtle distortions near the asteroid belt. Anomalies are irrelevant, Salvar said sharply. This system is primitive, incapable of resistance. Focus on the task. Unbeknownst to the Veltrax, the anomalies were anything but irrelevant. Across the solar system, human outposts and installations stirred from their covert slumber. On Mars, in a labyrinthine underground base shielded by layers of basalt, General Elias Vance stood before a tactical display of the enemy fleet's movements. The dim glow of the holographic interface painted his face in cold light, highlighting the stern lines of his jaw. Around him, officers and scientists bustled with quiet urgency, their hushed conversations creating an undercurrent of tension. "They're confident," Vance said, his voice steady. "Too confident. They think they've already won." Dr. Keon Ahmed, one of Earth's foremost scientists, adjusted his glasses as he studied the Veltrax propulsion signatures. "Their arrogance is a blindfold," he said, his tone clipped. "They're using gravity distortion engines, highly advanced but prone to inefficiencies. We can exploit that." Vance's sharp gaze shifted to the display. "Explain." Ahmed tapped the interface, enlarging the readings. "Their engines manipulate local gravity wells to achieve unparalleled acceleration, but near a planetary body, like Jupiter, the interference grows exponentially. If we generate targeted gravitational pulses, we can disrupt their navigation," Vance finished, his tone sharpening with understanding. "You're saying we can turn Jupiter into a weapon?" Ahmed nodded. "Precisely. We have satellites cloaked in Europa's orbit, equipped with prototype gravity amplifiers. If deployed strategically, they can create a distortion field strong enough to destabilize any vessel relying on gravity-based propulsion." Vance's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then let's ensure they regret choosing our system." Meanwhile, on Europa's icy surface, the chill bit into Commander Layla Cade's face as she adjusted her helmet. The subterranean research station, hidden beneath miles of frozen crust, hummed faintly with energy as her team made final preparations. The base was a testament to human ingenuity, a fortress concealed in a frozen wasteland, equipped with cutting-edge technology that the Veltrax would never suspect. "Cade, satellite array is calibrated," a voice crackled in her comms. It was Technician Ian Torres, his tone brisk. "We've got a clear signal." Cade nodded, her breath fogging the inside of her visor. "Good. Keep the field generators running at optimal power. If we lose synchronization, this whole plan goes to hell." Torres hesitated. "You think they'll notice us?" "They won't," Cade replied firmly. "By the time they do, it'll be too late." Above them, cloaked satellites glided silently through Europa's shadow, their surfaces absorbing and scattering light to avoid detection. They were equipped with gravity amplifiers that could, in theory, distort space-time itself, a weapon that had never been tested in a real engagement. As the Veltrax moved into Jupiter's orbit, their ships casting long shadows over the swirling storms of the gas giant, Zalvar studied the swirling bands of color with detached curiosity. The storms churned with unimaginable power, their lightning strikes illuminating the Veltrax fleet like ancient beacons. It was a place of raw, untamed energy, a fitting location for their temporary refuge. "Deploy the fleet into the shadow of the moons," Zalvar commanded. "Begin resource extraction protocols." Zephyr's fingers hesitated over the controls. "Exalted strategist, the anomalies near the asteroid belt. They've shifted. It's almost as if—" "Enough," Zalvar interrupted. "You focus too much on trivialities." But below the surface, the anomalies were deliberate, orchestrated by human ingenuity. The asteroid belt was alive with activity. Mining operations transformed into hidden fortresses, their drilling equipment repurposed into makeshift defense systems. In one such installation, Chief Engineer Alana Bryce adjusted a massive array of gravity manipulators. The control room buzzed with energy, its metallic walls reflecting the dim, pulsing lights of the machinery. "Gravity wells calibrated," Bryce said, her voice laced with urgency. "We can redirect the asteroids with a single pulse." "And if it fails?" asked Captain Rourke, his arms crossed as he watched from the corner of the room. "It won't," Bryce shot back. "Trust me, Captain. We've been planning for this longer than they've been alive." Rourke gave a grim nod. Then let's show them what we're made of. In the icy silence of the asteroid belt, massive rocks shifted unnaturally, their orbits altered by unseen forces. To the Velthrax, it might have appeared as a natural phenomenon, a trick of the cosmos. But to humanity, it was a calculated move, a quiet declaration of defiance. On the flagship, Zalvar frowned. His crest quivered faintly as an alert pulsed through the command console. "What is it?" Zephyr hesitated. One of the drones was destroyed. By an asteroid, Zalvar's gaze narrowed. An asteroid? Or something more? "We can't be certain," Zephyr admitted. "But the odds—" "Send another drone," Zalvar commanded, his tone sharp. "And increase our scans of the system. If these primitives are hiding something, I want to know." But the Velthrax wouldn't find humanity's secrets so easily. On the moon's surface, Hale stood in Kuiper Station, watching the alien fleet's movements with unyielding focus. He could feel the weight of the coming storm, the tension in the air as palpable as the hum of the station's machinery. "They're getting closer," Ava said, her voice a whisper. "They'll wish they hadn't," Hale replied. His tone was calm, almost too calm, like the stillness before an avalanche. Across the solar system, humanity's hidden strength began to coalesce. The Velthrax believed they had entered a system of prey, a mistake they were about to pay for. The vastness of Jupiter loomed like a colossus, its storms swirling in a chaotic dance of amber, crimson, and pearl. Lightning flashed across its gaseous surface, casting fleeting shadows over the Velthrax fleet as they maneuvered into the protective embrace of the gas giant's moons. Each ship seemed to pulse with energy, their angular designs drinking in the dim light like predators lying in wait. Yet, even here, amidst their calculated strategy, the unease in Zalvar's chest had grown. On the bridge of the obsidian vow, the supreme strategist stood rigid, his elongated form silhouetted against the holographic projections. "Progress?" he snapped, his voice slicing through the steady hum of the command center. "Resource extraction drones are operational," Zephyr replied, his spindly fingers dancing across the interface. "No resistance detected." Zalvar's multifaceted eyes flicked toward the projection. "Expand the scans. If these anomalies persist—" "Exalted strategist," a junior officer interrupted, his mandibles quivering. "Another drone destroyed, this time near Europa." Zalvar turned sharply. "Destroyed how?" The officer hesitated, his crest lowering. "Unclear. The data feed was severed moments before impact. The cause appears deliberate." "Deliberate?" Zalvar's crest bristled and his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "By whom?" Before the officer could respond, the obsidian vow trembled. A faint vibration coursed through the ship, barely perceptible but undeniable. Zalvar's gaze snapped to the holographic display, where subtle ripples distorted the projected trajectory of nearby vessels. "Gravity disruption," Zephyr murmured, his voice laced with unease. "Localized interference originating from—" Europa Zalvar's fingers curled into a fist. "Prepare a reconnaissance team. I want answers." Deep beneath Europa's icy surface, the tension in the research station was palpable. Commander Layla Cade stood in the dim control room, the flickering glow of holographic displays casting restless shadows on the metallic walls. Her team moved with urgent precision, their voices low but taut with determination. "Status?" Cade asked, her tone brisk. Torres glanced up from his console, his brow furrowed. "Gravity field stabilized." The pulse redirected the last wave of drones, but the disruption was detected. Cade exhaled, her breath clouding the cold air. "We knew this was a risk. How long before they respond?" Torres hesitated. "Not long. If they send a team, they'll target our generators first." Cade's jaw tightened. "Then we make it costly for them." The station hummed with life as engineers activated automated defenses. Hidden turrets emerged from the icy walls, their sleek barrels glinting ominously in the pale light. Cade adjusted her weapon, a compact plasma rifle modified for zero-visibility combat. Every sound, every faint vibration beneath her boots, felt amplified, as if the moon itself held its breath. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale stood in the observation bay of Kuiper Station, his eyes fixed on the distant glow of Jupiter. The holographic display before him mapped the enemy fleet's movements in real time, the crimson icons shifting like pieces on a vast and deadly chessboard. He tapped his earpiece, connecting to the command network. "This is Hale. Update on Europa?" Cade's voice crackled through the comms. "Still holding, but they've noticed us. Expecting company." "Stay sharp," Hale replied. "Reinforcements are on standby." He disconnected, his gaze lingering on the display. The Veltra fleet was too large, too coordinated. Every instinct told him they weren't dealing with a simple scouting mission. There was something else, something larger, at play. A faint tremor vibrated through the station, pulling Hale's focus to the asteroid field visible through the viewport. Tiny glimmers of light danced across the expanse, silent movements that only sharpened his unease. "Lieutenant," Ava called from the console behind him, her voice tight. "We've got incoming." Hale turned, his expression sharpening. "What kind of incoming?" "Veltra scouts," she replied, pointing to a cluster of glowing icons converging on the station's location. 5 ships, fast and armed. Hale's lips pressed into a grim line. "They're testing us. They want to see if we'll react." "Do we?" Ava asked, her fingers hovering over the station's defense systems. Hale hesitated. The protocol was clear: remain undetected for as long as possible. But letting the scouts get too close risked compromising the station entirely. He made his decision. "Deploy decoys," he ordered. "Redirect their attention to the outer belt. If they follow, we'll know they're not just scouting." As Ava initiated the sequence, a series of drones launched from the station, their cloaked surfaces mimicking the energy signatures of active human vessels. The decoys drifted silently into the asteroid field, their faint glows vanishing among the tumbling rocks. The Veltra scouts adjusted course almost immediately, their predatory movements confirming Hale's suspicion. He watched as the enemy ships pursued the decoys deeper into the field, their sleek forms weaving through the chaotic terrain. "They're hunting," Hale muttered, "but they won't find us. Not yet." Back on Europa, the research station shuddered as the first Veltra reconnaissance ship broke through the moon's icy crust. The alien vessel was a thing of cold elegance, its angular hull shimmering with faint bioluminescence. It hovered menacingly above the surface, its scanning arrays glowing with eerie light. Inside the station, Cade gripped her rifle tightly, her knuckles white beneath her gloves. The faint hum of the ship's engines reverberated through the walls, setting her teeth on edge. "They're scanning for the generators," Torres whispered. "If they find them—" "They won't," Cade interrupted. Her voice was calm but resolute. "We'll stop them before they can report back." As the ship deployed a squad of drones, tiny orbs of light that darted toward the station's entrance, Cade signaled her team. "Positions. Hold fire until I give the word." The drones moved with unnerving precision, their scanners casting faint beams of light across the frozen landscape. One by one, they approached the entrance, their metallic surfaces reflecting the cold glow of Europa's distant sun. "Now," Cade said softly. The station's automated turrets erupted to life, beams of concentrated plasma slicing through the drones with surgical precision. Sparks and shards of metal scattered across the icy ground, their faint echoes swallowed by the stillness. Inside the ship, the Veltra pilot snarled, his spines bristling with agitation. He activated the ship's weapons, targeting the station with a focused energy beam. But as the weapon charged, the ground beneath the ship trembled violently. The pilot's multifaceted eyes widened as a massive fissure split the ice, revealing a hidden defense platform. From the depths of Europa's crust, a pulse of energy surged upward, striking the ship with blinding force. The Veltra vessel buckled under the impact, its sleek hull fracturing as it spiraled out of control. Cade lowered her rifle, her expression unreadable. "They'll send more," she said quietly. "And we'll be ready," Torres replied, his voice steady despite the tension. Above Jupiter, the Veltra fleet began to stir, their formations shifting as reports from Europa filtered through their network. On the bridge of the Obsidian Vow, Zalvar's eyes narrowed, his spines rigid with fury. "Primitive," he muttered again, though the word carried less conviction. Increase the scans. I want every anomaly in this system accounted for. As the fleet moved into a more aggressive stance, Hale watched from Kuiper Station, his jaw tight. The first moves had been made, the pieces set in motion, but the real game was only just beginning. The cold silence of space shattered as the Veltra fleet moved into an attack formation. Their ships, angular and predatory, adjusted trajectories with eerie precision, encircling the moons of Jupiter like a tightening noose. Inside the obsidian vow, Zalvar stood at the edge of the command deck, his gaze locked on the swirling holographic display of the Sol system. His spines quivered with restrained fury. Europa has proven more problematic than anticipated, he said, his voice a low growl. If the humans want to resist, we will ensure they regret it. Zephyr hesitated, his mandibles twitching. Exalted strategist, there are reports of gravitational anomalies affecting our ships near the asteroid belt. It's possible they are more cunning than we gave them credit for. Zalvar interrupted, his tone icy. Do not mistake cunning for capability. Deploy the secondary fleet to neutralize their outer defenses. We will strip them of their illusions. As the fleet dispersed, the quiet tension on Europa turned electric. Commander Layla Cade watched from the control center, her eyes darting across the screens as data from the cloaked satellites poured in. The Veltra ships moved like shadows, swift and deliberate, but their trajectories betrayed their intentions. They're closing in, Torres said, his voice taut. 4 ships, heavy weaponry. They're targeting the generators. Cade nodded, her fingers tightening on the edge of the console. Let them get closer. Activate the pulse emitters once they're in range. The walls of the control center seemed to hum with anticipation, the faint vibrations resonating through the icy structure. Outside, the jagged surface of Europa glowed faintly as the defense grid powered up, its hidden emitters buried deep beneath the ice. Visual contact, Torres called out, his tone sharp. They're here! The lead Veltra ship descended like a harbinger, its hull gleaming under the faint light of Jupiter's distant reflection. Energy cannons extended from its underside, their barrels glowing with an ominous red hue. Cade watched, her breath shallow, as the ship hovered over the frozen expanse. Hold, she whispered. The Veltra vessel unleashed its first barrage, beams of concentrated energy slicing through the ice with violent precision. Steam erupted into the frigid air, the hiss echoing like a serpent's warning. Cade clenched her jaw, her pulse pounding in her ears. Now, she shouted. The ground beneath the alien ship erupted as Europa's pulse emitters activated. Waves of gravitational distortion rippled outward, slamming into the Veltra ship with devastating force. The vessel buckled, its hull fracturing as it spun wildly. Its engines roared in protest before flickering and going silent. The shattered remains plummeted into the moon's icy crust, the impact sending a tremor through the control center. Direct hit, Torres said, his voice tinged with exhilaration. Cade allowed herself a brief nod of satisfaction before turning back to the console. What about the others? Adjusting course, Torres replied. They're retreating, but not far. They'll regroup. Let them, Cade said, her tone steely. They've underestimated us once. It won't happen again. While the battle raged on Europa, Marcus Hale monitored the unfolding chaos from Kuiper Station. The asteroid belt had become a battlefield, with human forces using the shifting rocks as both cover and weaponry. Hale's sharp eyes tracked the movement of cloaked drones as they manipulated the gravitational fields, redirecting massive asteroids toward the encroaching Veltra fleet. Status on the decoy platforms? Hale asked, his voice calm despite the rising tension. Ava glanced at her display. Active and holding. They're drawing fire, but the fleet's adapting. They're using smaller ships to flank the formations. Then we adapt faster, Hale replied. Deploy the kinetic mines. Force them into the choke points. The command room buzzed with urgency as technicians executed Hale's orders. Outside the station, a series of metallic orbs detached from hidden launch bays, drifting silently into the belt. Their matte surfaces absorbed the faint starlight, rendering them nearly invisible. As the Veltra ships advanced, the mines activated, their gravity fields pulling nearby asteroids into their paths. The first explosion was deafening. even through the vacuum of space. A Veltrak scout ship disintegrated, its fragments scattering like embers in the darkness. The others hesitated, their movements erratic as they recalibrated. Hale watched, his expression unreadable, as the fleet faltered. "They're slowing," Ava said, her voice tinged with awe. "Not enough," Hale replied, his tone clipped. "Prepare the next wave. Keep them guessing." On the Martian surface, General Elias Vance stood in the subterranean command center, his gaze fixed on the massive display dominating the war room. The Veltrak fleet's movements were charted in real time, the red icons shifting like predators stalking prey. "They're dividing their forces," Vance observed, his tone calm. "A tactical misstep." Dr. Keon Ahmed nodded, his fingers flying across his tablet. "They're spreading thin to cover multiple targets. It's a gamble, one we can exploit." "Agreed," Vance said. He turned to the room, his voice firm. "Activate the railguns. Target their lead ships. Make them rethink their approach." The war room buzzed with activity as technicians relayed commands. Above the Martian surface, hidden silos opened, revealing massive kinetic cannons. The railguns fired in unison, their projectiles accelerating to near-light speed. The first impact struck a Veltrak destroyer, its shield collapsing under the sheer force. The ship imploded, its remains spiraling toward the planet's surface. The Veltrak fleet responded swiftly, redirecting their firepower toward Mars. Energy beams rained down, carving molten scars into the red sands. But the planet's defenses held firm, the railguns continuing their relentless assault. As the battle escalated, Zalvar's fury reached a boiling point. On the bridge of the Obsidian Vow, his spines flared, his voice sharp as he barked orders. "Enough of this cat-and-mouse game. Deploy the dreadnoughts. We will crush their resistance." The Veltrak dreadnoughts, massive ships bristling with weaponry, moved into position. Their arrival cast long shadows over Jupiter's moons, their engines roaring like thunder. Zalvar watched with grim satisfaction as the first dreadnought targeted the asteroid belt. "They will learn," he said softly, his tone laced with menace. "This system is ours." But even as the Veltrak fleet advanced, the humans of Sol remained unyielding. On Europa, in the asteroid belt, and on Mars, the resistance grew stronger, their strategies evolving with each passing moment. Hale's gaze remained fixed on the display, his mind racing with possibilities. "They think they've seen everything we have," he said quietly. "They're wrong." As the Veltrak dreadnoughts unleashed their fury, a faint shimmer flickered across the display. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Hale noticed it immediately. His lips curved into a grim smile. "They're not prepared for what's next," he murmured, "and they never will be." The darkness of space erupted in chaos. The Veltrak dreadnoughts, looming like mechanical gods, unleashed torrents of energy beams that illuminated the void in pulses of crimson and gold. Asteroids disintegrated under the relentless bombardment, their fragments spinning like shrapnel across the battlefield. The human silence had ended, replaced by the defiant roar of hidden defenses springing to life. Marcus Hale stood in Kuiper Station's control room, his face illuminated by the holographic map of the unfolding carnage. His pulse quickened as he watched the Veltrak dreadnoughts closing in on their outer defenses. Their size and firepower dwarfed anything humanity had encountered before, but his focus was unwavering. "Status on the gravity nets?" Hale asked, his voice cutting through the tense air. "They're online and stable," Ava replied, her tone steady despite the weight of the moment. "Target's locked. We can trigger the cascade whenever you're ready." Hale's fingers brushed against the control interface, his gaze fixed on the largest of the Veltrak dreadnoughts. Its angular hull bristled with weapons, and its propulsion system sent ripples through the nearby asteroid field. "They wanted to see what we're capable of," Hale murmured. "Let's show them." He pressed the command sequence, and the station's gravity manipulators surged to life. Invisible waves of distortion rippled outward, ensnaring the nearby asteroids in their grasp. The rocks began to shift and accelerate, their trajectories aimed directly at the Veltrak fleet. The first impact was cataclysmic. A boulder the size of a city slammed into the side of the lead dreadnought, its shields flaring brilliantly before collapsing under the sheer force. The hull crumpled like paper, venting streams of debris and atmosphere into space. The remaining dreadnoughts adjusted their formations, their weapons firing at the incoming onslaught, but the field was relentless. Dozens of asteroids rained down upon them, their impacts shaking even the mightiest of vessels. Inside the obsidian vow, Zalvar's fury was palpable. His crest quivered violently, and his voice rose above the alarms blaring throughout the bridge. "Retreat!" "Never!" Zalvar snarled, slamming a translucent fist onto the console. "Deploy all fighters. Overwhelm them with numbers. I want those gravity nets destroyed." Zephyr's mandibles clicked nervously as he relayed the orders. "Exalted strategist, the humans' defenses are more advanced than anticipated. Their weapon systems, they are an irritation," Zalvar snapped. "Nothing more." But even as the Veltra fighters surged forward, the humans' countermeasures escalated. On Mars, the subterranean command center buzzed with energy as General Elias Vance coordinated the next phase of their response. The railguns had taken their toll, but the Velthrak's reinforcements were pushing toward the inner planets. "Activate the orbital platforms," Vance ordered, his voice unyielding, "and deploy the stealth fleet. We hit them where it hurts." Above Mars, the hidden orbital platforms emerged from their cloaked positions, their surfaces shimmering as they powered up. Each was equipped with experimental energy disruptors, designed to overload the Velthrak ship's shielding systems. As the platforms unleashed their first salvo, beams of concentrated light lanced across the battlefield, striking the approaching fighters with surgical precision. Their shields flickered and failed, leaving them vulnerable to follow-up strikes from the Martian railguns. In the midst of the chaos, Hale's attention shifted to a new alert on the display. A small detachment of Velthrak ships had broken off from the main fleet, heading directly for Earth. "They're testing our core defenses," Hale muttered. He tapped into the command network. "Vance, they're heading for the planet. We need to intercept." "I see it," Vance replied, his tone grim. "The Spectre fleet is already en route. Hold the line, Lieutenant." Far above Earth, the Spectre fleet moved with ghostly precision. Sleek and angular, the ships seemed to materialize out of nowhere, their cloaking systems disengaging as they engaged the Velthrak detachment. Plasma bolts lit up the void as the human vessels weaved through the enemy formation, their movements precise and unpredictable. On the bridge of the lead Spectre ship, Commander Ryland Drake barked orders, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. "Target their propulsion systems. Disable. Don't destroy. We need the data." The Spectre ships executed his commands flawlessly, their weapons carving through the Velthrak ships with chilling efficiency. One by one, the alien vessels sputtered to a halt, their engines flickering as they succumbed to the humans' coordinated assault. Meanwhile, on Europa, Commander Cade braced herself against the tremor that rattled the control room. The Velthrak forces had regrouped, their remaining ships converging on the station with unrelenting aggression. "Shield integrity?" Cade demanded, her voice cutting through the cacophony. "Down to 45%, Torres replied, his face pale but determined. "They're targeting the generators." "Divert auxiliary power," Cade ordered, "and prepare the counterstrike. We're not done yet." Outside, the icy landscape erupted as Europa's remaining defenses sprang to life. Automated turrets fired in rapid succession, their plasma bolts cutting through the thin atmosphere. The Velthrak ships dodged and weaved, but the humans' firepower was relentless. As the battle raged on, a sense of desperation began to creep into the Velthrak ranks. Inside the obsidian vow, Zalvar clenched his jaw, his spines trembling with barely contained rage. "Exalted strategist," Zephyr said cautiously, "our forces are being overwhelmed. Their tactics are irrelevant," Zalvar hissed. "We will adapt, and we will annihilate them." But even as Zalvar's words echoed through the bridge, the humans' advantage became undeniable. On every front, Europa, Mars, the asteroid belt, the Velthrak fleet was faltering, their once coordinated formations now fragmented, their superior firepower rendered ineffective by the humans' ingenuity and resolve. Hale watched the battle unfold, his breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Every maneuver, every strike, felt like a calculated step toward victory. But he knew the fight was far from over. "They'll push back harder," Hale said, his voice low. "This is just the beginning." Ava glanced at him, her brow furrowed. "And when they do?" Hale's gaze remained fixed on the display, his expression resolute. "We'll show them why they should have stayed away." The battlefield had grown eerily silent, save for the low hum of distant engines and the sporadic bursts of energy weapons. The Veltra fleet, once a display of unassailable power, was scattered. Their formations were frayed, their confidence unraveling. On the bridge of the obsidian vow, Zalvar gripped the edge of the console, his translucent fingers trembling. The holographic display before him showed the grim reality. The humans were not just defending, they were winning. "They adapt too quickly," Zephyr murmured, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "Every maneuver we make, they counter. Every strike, they anticipate." "Enough!" Zalvar roared, his crest flaring violently. "They are vermin, nothing more. Vermin can't triumph over the superior species." Yet his words rang hollow, even to himself. He turned back to the display, his multifaceted eyes scanning the relentless human advance. Their fleets moved with precision, each ship a cog in a machine of calculated chaos. Zalvar's pride began to crumble, replaced by something he hadn't felt in decades: fear. At the heart of the human counterattack, Marcus Hale watched the holographic map in Kuiper Station with unrelenting focus. Every red icon that vanished brought a surge of grim satisfaction. But he knew better than to let it distract him. The Veltra were wounded, but a wounded predator was often the most dangerous. "Commander Drake reports that the Veltra fighters near Earth are neutralized," Ava said, her voice breaking through the tension. "The Spectre fleet is regrouping and ready for the final strike." Hale nodded. "Good. Keep the pressure on. We're not just holding the line anymore. We're breaking it." His attention shifted to the asteroid belt, where the largest Veltra dreadnoughts were regrouping. These massive ships, their hulls bristling with weaponry, represented the last bastion of the alien fleet's power. If they fell, the battle would be over. "Patch me through to General Vance," Hale ordered. Within moments, Vance's resolute face appeared on the display. "What's the status?" "They're rallying near the belt," Hale replied. "It's their last stand. If we hit them hard now, we can end this." Vance's expression hardened. "Agreed. The orbital platforms will provide covering fire. Spectre fleet will flank from the outer rim. And Marcus?" "Yes, sir?" "Make sure they know this is our home." As the orders were relayed, humanity's forces began their final push. Above Mars, the orbital platforms unleashed a devastating barrage, their disruptors cutting through the Velthrak shields like knives through silk. The Spectre fleet moved in concert, their cloaked ships appearing out of nowhere to deliver precision strikes before vanishing again. It was a symphony of destruction, each movement choreographed to perfection. Inside the obsidian vow, chaos reigned. Officers shouted over one another, their voices tinged with panic as reports of destroyed ships and failing systems flooded the bridge. Zalvar's spines drooped, his once proud posture now hunched. He stared at the display, watching his fleet disintegrate. "Exalted strategist," Zephyr began hesitantly, "perhaps we should consider retreat." Zalvar's gaze snapped to his subordinate, his eyes blazing. "Retreat?" "There is no retreat. There is only victory or annihilation." But even as he spoke, a deep tremor ran through the ship. The obsidian vow shuddered violently, and a cascade of sparks rained down from an overloaded console. Zalvar stumbled, his hands gripping the edge of the command console for support. "What was that?" he barked. "Direct hit," Zephyr replied, his voice shaking. "They're orbital platforms. Our shields are failing." Zalvar's mind raced. Every scenario, every contingency plan seemed to collapse under the weight of their enemy's relentless assault. How had he underestimated them so completely? How had the humans, these primitives, bested the might of the Velthrak? In the asteroid belt, the final confrontation reached its apex. Marcus Hale stood at the center of Kuiper Station's control room, his voice steady as he directed the attack. "Target the lead dreadnought's engines," he ordered. If we take it out, the rest will scatter. The station's gravity manipulators surged to life, redirecting a cluster of asteroids toward the Veltra flagship. The massive rocks hurtled through space, their trajectories precise. The lead dreadnought's shields flared under the impact, but the strain proved too much. With a deafening explosion, the engines failed, sending the ship spiraling out of control. On board the Obsidian Vow, Zalvar felt the impact like a physical blow. The flagship's lights flickered, and the alarms grew deafening. His crest drooped further as he stared at the holographic map. The humans were closing in, their ships forming an unbreakable net around the remnants of his fleet. "Exalted strategist," Zephyr said, his tone hollow. "They've surrounded us." Zalvar's fingers tightened into fists. He had led countless campaigns, crushed empires, and yet here he was, outmaneuvered, outmatched. He turned to his crew, his voice a growl. "Prepare for ramming speed. If we are to fall, we will take them with us." But even as the command left his lips, a transmission cut through the chaos. It was a human voice, calm and resolute. "Veltra Fleet, this is General Elias Vance of the United Earth Defense Force. Your forces are defeated. Your weapons are neutralized. Surrender now, and you will be treated with dignity. Refuse, and there will be no quarter." The bridge fell silent. Zalvar's spines quivered as he stared at the transmission, his pride battling with the reality of his failure. Around him his crew waited, their multifaceted eyes reflecting fear and uncertainty. Zephyr spoke softly. "Exalted strategist, what do we do?" Zalvar's gaze lingered on the holographic display. The human ships were everywhere, their weapons trained on the shattered remnants of his fleet. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his crest in a gesture of surrender. "Transmit our surrender," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As the message was relayed, a cheer erupted across humanity's forces. The battle was over. The Veltra fleet had fallen, their arrogance shattered by the resilience and ingenuity of their adversaries. On Kuiper Station, Marcus Hale leaned back in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up to him. He looked at the map, now devoid of enemy icons, and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "We did it," Ava said, her voice filled with relief. "No," Hale replied, his tone firm. "We proved it." Above Earth, the Spectre fleet regrouped, their ships forming a protective perimeter around the planet. On Mars, the railguns powered down, their barrels still glowing from the heat of battle. Across the solar system, humanity stood united, their victory a testament to their strength and determination. And on the bridge of the Obsidian Vow, Zalvar sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the distant blue orb that had defied him. For the first time, he truly understood the depth of his miscalculation. "They are not primitives," he murmured to himself. "They are something far more dangerous." Back on Earth, General Vance addressed the gathered leaders of humanity. His voice carried the weight of their victory, but also a warning. "We have shown the galaxy that we will not be underestimated," he said, "but this is not the end. It is the beginning. They came here expecting weakness. They left understanding that we are more than they ever imagined." As the room erupted in applause, Vance allowed himself a rare smile. Humanity had faced the void, and the void had blinked.